The secret fight that almost destroyed Happy Days. By the late 1970s, Happy Days wasn't just another sitcom. It was America's comfort food. Every week, millions tuned in to watch Richie Cunningham, the all-American boy next door, navigate life in Milwaukee. But behind the laughs and the jukebox tunes, a storm was brewing that almost tore the show apart. The problem? Richie wasn't the star anymore. It was Arthur Fonzarelli. The leather jacket, the motorcycle, the A. Fonzie had taken over. Henry Winkler went from supporting role to cultural icon almost overnight. Kids copied his style, stores couldn't keep his merchandise in stock, and advertisers lined up to cash in on his cool. That's when ABC executives made their move. They wanted to rename the series Fonzie's Happy Days. On paper, it sounded like smart marketing. In reality, it was a bomb waiting to explode. For Ron Howard, the actor who had carried the show since day one, the proposed change felt like a personal betrayal. Richie Cunningham wasn't just a character. It was his creation, his anchor. And now the network was trying to push him into the background of his own show. So he gave them an ultimatum. Change the title in few walks. No hesitation, no bargaining. At just 21 years old, Howard stared down the most powerful network executives in television and refused to back down. It was a shocking move for a young actor in the 70s, when careers lived or died by the studio system. But Ron Howard wasn't bluffing. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Henry Winkler himself backed him up. Fonzie may have been the breakout star, but Winkler knew the magic only worked because of the ensemble. Without Richie, without the Cunningham family, there was no Happy Days. ABC blinked, the title stayed, the show survived. But the scars from that fight never fully healed. Because if executives were willing to risk the future of their biggest hit over 2 words, what would they do when even bigger decisions came along? The untold pain behind the Fonz's cool smile. To the outside world, Henry Winkler had it all. Overnight, he went from an unknown actor to the face of cool in America. Fonzie was everywhere, on lunchboxes, posters, cereal boxes. Fans screamed his name on the street. Kids lined up just to get his autograph. But the truth was darker than the leather jacket he wore. Before Happy Days, Winkler was broke. He couldn't even afford to pay his phone bill, let alone dream of superstardom. He walked into that audition room thinking it would be another rejection, another role slipping away. Instead, he walked out with the part that would change his life forever. At first, it felt like a miracle. But soon, the blessing turned into a curse. Fonzie wasn't just a character anymore. He became a prison. Casting directors didn't see Henry Winkler, the actor. They saw Fonzie, the caricature. Hollywood slammed door after door in his face. No one wanted him for serious roles. No one thought he could be anything but the cool guy with the catchphrases. The man who once had the world chanting his name suddenly couldn't get work. He battled doubt, depression, and the crushing fear that his career had peaked before it even began. But Henry Winkler wasn't done fighting. He reinvented himself, first behind the camera as a director and producer, then slowly, carefully, back in front of it. Decades after being typecast into a corner, Winkler shocked everyone by winning an Emmy for his role in HBO's Barry. It wasn't just a trophy, it was vindication, a career reborn. And yet, through it all, he never turned his back on Fonzie. He kept the jacket, he kept the memories, and he never forgot that the role that nearly broke him also made him unforgettable. Because sometimes the brightest spotlight can cast the darkest shadows. The Olympics that killed Happy Days. By the early 80s, Happy Days was running on fumes. Ratings were slipping, storylines felt recycled, and younger viewers were drifting toward new shows. The network needed a big finale, something explosive to bring back the magic one last time. They had a plan, a primetime event that would go down in history. But then the 1984 Summer Olympics happened. ABC decided to air the finale right in the middle of the Olympic Games. It was a programming disaster. Millions of eyes were glued to Los Angeles, cheering for gold medals and world records. Hardly anyone tuned in to say goodbye to Richie, Fonzie, and the rest of the gang. What was supposed to be a triumphant send-off turned into a ratings nightmare. For the cast, it felt like a betrayal. After a decade of carrying ABC's primetime lineup, Happy Days wasn't just ending, it was being buried alive. The network that once fought to protect the show now tossed it aside as collateral damage for bigger events. Fans barely noticed the finale. Newspapers hardly mentioned it. The show that had once defined American pop culture disappeared almost overnight. And behind the cameras, the fallout was even uglier. Careers stalled, dreams crumbled, and some cast members were left scrambling for work in a Hollywood that had already moved on. But the real heartbreak, it wasn't just about low ratings. It was about what the finale revealed about the cracks forming behind the scenes. Cracks that would soon shatter friendships and reputations forever. On screen, the Cunningham family felt unshakable. Richie, Joni, Mr. and Mrs. C, they were the perfect picture of small-town America. But off-screen, Happy Days was starting to feel anything but happy. Money was the spark that lit the fire. For years, cast members claimed they weren't getting their fair share from merchandise sales. Lunchboxes, dolls, t-shirts, millions of dollars in profits were rolling in. Yet some of the actors saw little to none of it. At first, the grumbling was quiet. Then it exploded. In 2011, long after the show had ended, several cast members, including Marion Ross, Erin Moran, Anson Williams, and Don Most, actually sued CBS over unpaid royalties. They alleged that the network had pocketed millions while giving them only scraps. The lawsuit exposed a darker truth about Hollywood contracts. Even when you're on a hit show, the people at the top always seem to get the biggest cut. But it wasn't just money. Jealousy simmered too. The rise of Fonzie had created a quiet divide in the cast. Ron Howard admitted he sometimes felt pushed aside, even though he hit it well at the time. Others resented how the spotlight seemed to shrink whenever Henry Winkler walked onto the set. And then there was Erin Moran, Joni. She struggled more than anyone once the camera stopped. A spin-off, Joni Loves Chachi, was supposed to launch her into stardom. Instead, it bombed in less than a season. Behind the laughter track, Moran faced financial troubles, depression, and battles that tragically haunted her for the rest of her life. The magic of Happy Days was built on friendship, family, and nostalgia. But behind the curtain, cracks in that family were getting harder and harder to hide. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more chaotic, Hollywood invented a phrase that would forever haunt the legacy of the show. It was supposed to be just another wild storyline, a stunt to keep audiences glued to their TVs, but instead, it became the moment that defined not only Happy Days, but every TV show that tried too hard to stay alive. In season 5, producers scripted a scene where Fonzie would literally water ski over a shark, leather jacket on, thumbs up in the air, cool as ever, flying over the ocean like some cartoon superhero. At first, viewers cheered. Fonzie could do no wrong, but critics and fans started whispering, had the show gone too far? That whisper became a roar. The phrase, "jumping the shark," was born, coined years later by a college student who pointed to that exact episode as the moment Happy Days stopped being great. Overnight, it became shorthand for when a TV show crosses the line from brilliant to ridiculous, and the label stuck like glue. Even Henry Winkler himself admits he knew it was silly, but at the time, no one imagined it would haunt the show's legacy forever. To this day, when a series pushes outlandish storylines to keep ratings alive, critics still say they jumped the shark. The sad truth? What was supposed to be a fun stunt became a death sentence. Happy Days was never taken quite as seriously again. And the irony is brutal. The very character who saved the show in the early seasons may have been the same one who doomed it in the end. But the real tragedy wasn't the shark, it was what happened after. The finale that should have been a celebration, but instead felt like a funeral. After 11 seasons, the writers of Happy Days knew they had to give fans closure. The final episode wasn't filled with stunts or gimmicks. No sharks, no motorcycles flying over ramps. Just a Cunningham family gathered one last time. Then came the twist. Richie Cunningham himself returned. Ron Howard, who had left years earlier to chase a directing career, stepped back into the role that made him famous. For longtime fans, it was like watching the heart of the show beat again, if only for a moment. And then something no one expected happened. At the very end, Tom Bosley, who played Mr. Cunningham, turned to the camera. He broke the fourth wall. He looked directly at the audience and thanked them for being part of their family for over a decade. It wasn't just a line in a script, it was real. You could see it in his eyes. The cast wasn't just saying goodbye to their characters, They were saying goodbye to the fans and to each other. Some of them cried, others tried to smile through the pain, but the weight of the moment was crushing. A show that had defined an entire era of television was closing its doors, and everyone knew it. For Ron Howard, it was the final chapter of his acting career. That farewell wasn't just Richie walking away from Milwaukee. It was Ron walking away from Hollywood as an actor, ready to become one of the greatest directors of all time. The finale could have been remembered as one of the most touching endings in TV history, but ABC's bad decisions and what happened next would overshadow it forever. Because, shockingly, Happy Days didn't actually end with the finale. Fans thought they had witnessed a perfect goodbye. The family dinner, the heartfelt speech, the emotional closure, it felt final. But ABC wasn't ready to let go. Behind the scenes, the network had a problem. They still had leftover episodes, scripts that had already been filmed but never aired. And instead of shelving them, they made a shocking decision. They dumped them on TV after the finale. What was supposed to be the emotional high point of the series was suddenly undone. Instead of leaving on a note of nostalgia and dignity, viewers got random extra episodes with no Richie, no heartfelt closure, just filler. It confused fans, it cheapened the farewell, and it left Happy Days stumbling to the finish line instead of bowing out gracefully. Even the cast hated it. They knew the dinner scene should have been the final moment, the last image audiences remembered. Instead, their goodbye got buried under episodes no one asked for. The result? A finale that could have gone down as legendary instead became an afterthought, overshadowed by scheduling blunders, leftover scripts, and ABC's desperation to squeeze out every last dollar. And yet, the story of Happy Days didn't end there, because years later, something unbelievable happened. Something that proved the show's legacy was too powerful to die.